Hello again. I cannot pretend to be surprised that Jess Philips, who holds the imposing title of Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, should be resisting calls for a government inquiry into some of the worst cases of violence against girls ever seen in this country. She has two motives for doing so, neither of them honourable. In the first instance, the Birmingham constituency which she holds contains many Pakistani voters, and since she only scraped in with a very thin majority of 600 or so at the last election, she's terrified of saying or doing anything which might lose her any Pakistani Muslim votes. The second reason for trying to avoid scrutiny of what happened a few years ago during the scandal of the so-called grooming gangs is that the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was for much of that time the Director of Public Prosecutions. It is widely assumed that he did his best in that role to suppress any bad publicity which might have caused such words as Pakistani or Muslim to appear widely in the news media. With an eye to his future political ambitions, he would have been keenly aware that the Labour Party relies heavily upon the votes of immigrant families, and that Pakistanis in particular, and Muslims in general, would be furiously angry if the public were to form the impression that grooming gangs were racist in nature and almost exclusively associated with a certain religion and particular nationality. Which, of course, they were. It was just that nobody wished this to become widely known. Various efforts have been launched, of course, to try and stop this information being voiced abroad, and until a year or two ago, it was possible to claim that the whole business was a fantasy of the far right, little better than a conspiracy theory. Figures were released which claimed to show that white British people were more likely to be involved in such goings on than Pakistani Muslims, but this was, of course, a complete falsehood. The trick was pulled by lumping such things together with the crime of incest and child abuse in general, which, because white British people make up 85% of the population, means that taken as a whole, offences involving abuse of children like that are more likely to be committed by white British people. It is, of course, a different thing entirely when you examine specifically the phenomenon of grooming gangs. One defence being advanced by members of the present government for not holding an inquiry is that the last government or two of the Conservatives didn't hold one either. The last few Conservative governments were so ghastly corrupt, inefficient and dishonest that I'm surprised that Labour wishes to justify its policies by claiming only to be following the same course of action as Boris Johnson, Theresa May and so on. I rather think that this is a national scandal which is not going to go away, and that eventually there will be an inquiry, and that when there is, it will reveal that Keir Starmer is horribly culpable in a systematic cover-up. No wonder the government's frantically resisting any attempts to look into the matter.